My name is Dave Moore, and I started a company called Pragmint. We were founded 5 years ago with the goal of really helping companies improve their software delivery lifecycle. And so sometimes that's bringing in new tools for their teams to use. Sometimes that's upskilling the developers in the organization, and other times that's like refining the processes that are happening there. But we are heavily influenced by the kind of traditional craftsmanship, XP, agile type of techniques. And so really we're trying to create those SDLCs that are kind of smooth and you can go from, hey, I've got this idea to delivered quickly. We also take a lot of inspiration from the DORA research as well. So really at the end of the day, it's about how do we deliver quickly and how do we not have a bunch of defects along the way. Now, how does that relate to AI? Your kind of question is like, where are we at as an industry? And I get a little shy talking about industry trends because I don't feel that we as a company have a clear pulse of like where everybody's at. Mostly when we get a phone call from organizations, it's because things aren't going well. And so sometimes they're using AI, other times they're not there yet. But rarely are we getting the phone call from the company that has things dialed in and figured out. And so we've done a bunch of experiments internally and have brought a bunch of, what I would call good practices around how you use AI tooling to our customers. But, I'm not willing to say, oh, the game has changed, entirely. And, developers' job today is distinctly different than it was yesterday. I guess I haven't seen or felt that at an organization yet. And so whenever I hear people talking about, oh, I haven't written code in the traditional sense in 6 months or whatever, I get suspicious, but also curious because it's like, am I not understanding something? But I've spent a decent amount of time playing around with this whole ecosystem and learning from people and kind of peeling back the marketing speak into the real technical practices. And from what I can tell, when implemented correctly, there is a big step change in kind of the effectiveness that you can have. But there's all these caveats, like you have to have certain building blocks in place in order to create, like a useful agentic flow. So and out of the box, just by using Cursor or Cloud Code or Copilot or Codex or whatever you're using, I don't feel like you're well set up to kind of deliver on those promises that the hype train will have you believe, as it were.
Do you see that we will get to a point where not knowing a coding language is going to be needed, and that we will just need to know how to prompt correctly?
Who knows?
Okay.
If that's a claim that somebody's making today, that's like, oh yeah, we're just writing down in the English language and the model's taking it from there, my brain goes to calling BS immediately on that front. And because, I've tried to reproduce, these claims in a handful of situations. And what I found is, especially out of the box, these models, these tools can read your code base, but there's all sorts of like, okay, well, what's it take to deploy this thing? What are the how's this, like, are there errors that are being reported? Is there telemetry data in production that's kind of indicating there's problems? And like, there's a lot of even like what do we build in those product conversations? There's a lot of context that exists outside of the code base that you're not just going to be able to quickly type into a prompt and go from there. So yeah, I guess I'll shift a little bit into a question that you didn't directly ask, but you're kind of leading me down towards, which is, a lot of people are talking about harness engineering right now, where it's like, hey, how do you build the environment so that it's AI native, right? You can give the signals to the tool that you're using, the LLM back tool, so that it knows, hey, did I do something correct or not correct? And I'm seeing that's where I'm seeing a ton of value. It's not to the point where it's like, oh yeah, have this thing running for over and over for like months on end and you'll have a viable business on the other side of that. But where there's a lot of good signals that can come back to that model from the point of view of like, hey, linting errors or build errors or telemetry data saying yes, this reached the outcome that you were attempting to have, sort of thing. You got to feed it back into the model that the code base itself doesn't embody that information. And the more quality signals that you can put in there, being mindful of not bloating your context window and making it kind of all useful and lost in the sauce. If you can find a way to get there and dial it into that sweet spot where it's got all the context it needs, then I've seen it behave in more useful ways. And so that's where I'm personally experimenting a lot. And that's in, with working with our clients and also in personal projects of mine and internal projects at Pragmint. And I don't think we found the quote unquote sweet spot yet, but we're getting closer and closer with focused effort in like feeding those important signals and back into the model through tooling, through automated processes like a build process or an automated release process or whatever the database migration process. The more you can go, like, because to your original point, it's like, how does the model know what it did is what you wanted it to do? If it's coming back and guessing over and over again, and you're having to really be like, okay, is like, to understand if it did what you wanted it to do, you've got to really dig into the context. And so that's a laborious thing. Review fatigue is something that Michael Feathers talks about, and I've experienced that. And if you care about like the long-term maintainability of the system, you're going to pay close attention to what's being built, and that can create issues if it doesn't have all the signals that you need, and the burden of review becomes unmaintainable. And so it's like, okay, well then if we say, okay, well, let's not review it, let's just YOLO, let it do its thing, you're going to basically, from my experience, I've found situations where you're asking it to do something, but the underlying code base is so, I don't know, spaghetti-like, that it is not actually able to come back with a working solution most of the time. So you wind up, hitting try again, and you get the feeling of I'm just sitting at the slot machine and hoping that I can, get the lucky winner. And that's a helpless feeling, and that is evidence that you've gone too far down that path and need to kind of rewind a little bit.
But could it be a little bit of what you prompt is what you get? Should we learn how to prompt more properly?
I think that there are limitations to just focusing on the prompt itself. What does your prompt entail, right? Like, if you're manually creating these prompts, then that's going to be very difficult to give it the right indication, the right signals as to like, what do we need? If you've got, again, these systems where it's like, hey, I'm going to spawn off a sub agent to go pull the logs and give it the relevant logs and only add the relevant logs to that original prompt or the context window, then it's like, okay, that's useful, right? And so, yeah, like to an extent, it's about the prompt, but I would go, if you're in the traditional sense focusing on the prompt, we're talking about like somebody just, what am I typing in the thing? And if you're manually typing in all of this stuff that, your model depends on, that's going to be a lot of work. And so my advice would be, and where I've found success in kind of getting better output from these systems, is focus on automating the fetching of that context, the relevant context, wherever you can. And so that's what a lot of people talk about when they talk about harness engineering.
Yeah. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that it was a fear that the human portion was going to be useless at some point because the AI was going to take over all of the process. But the reality is that either human in the loop or human on the loop will still need to be part of it one way or another, either prompting, as you were saying, or supervising what the thing is doing so that we can unblock it and guide it to come to the right conclusion. But in the end, perhaps it's about how can we mitigate the fatigue that you were talking earlier, to the point that we can actually start trusting on the agents to do what they are supposed to do. Because in the end, throughout all this interaction, the idea is that the thing will evolve and learn and be more efficient every time of the way, to the point that there are some things that you are going to blindly trust. Did you see that coming?
You're right. I would agree with you that to get the outcomes that we're hoping for, you need a human in the loop in some capacity to ensure that things are working. And kind of the points I was making earlier are like, how do you make that easier and get it to the point where you can trust it to go a little further each time? But I've not seen any system or anybody or any company that so far that's actually able to go human out of the loop, right? And will that ever happen, I think is your question now. I don't know is like the safe answer there. And I mean, at a certain point, like what did we do? Like we modeled LLMs after, it's like it's a neural network under the hood, and that's modeled after like, well, how does the human brain work? But down that rabbit hole, there's huge differences between how a human brain works and how like an LLM works under the hood. And so I suspect we're not going to get to the quality level of human judgment with LLMs, in that we're going to bump into architectural limitations. And so I'm guessing it's going to be something other than LLMs that, if we ever get there, will be that. And so kind of how we like what we know is as kind of AI and agentic workflows and all this stuff, I doubt we're going to get there with kind of our current approach.
So to an extent, this idea of the evolution of AI, so started with the LLM, now we are in the agentic, so we will have a couple of layers, but the goal is to get to perhaps this nirvana that you were describing a little bit, that people is now calling the super intelligence. And I have a couple of analogies. So one is the reliability we have when we press the gas on a car, and we literally don't care about all those interactions that the computer has to do, or the networking the computer in the car has to do to make sure that the engine is getting enough gas to spark and all that. And we don't care about it. We just hit the gas and we know that it's going to go, and that's about it. And then the other analogy that I hear is that in the past we were like the pilots of a plane, looking at all the gouges and making clicks here and there, and somehow even making the decision to take control over it to eventually land. But now there's people that says that only work with it like in a air control type of mode, where they are just monitoring everything that it's doing. And it's trusting it for the most part. Do you think that with the current capabilities or the near future capabilities that we have, is it possible to build reliable agentic platforms that we can trust blindly?
No.
Okay.
But do I think that what we have and what we're building towards can get us part of the way there, where developers are much more effective at some of the tasks that they do? I think we're already there. Sure. And the scope of what this tooling will be capable of will get better and better. Do I think that this underlying architecture is capable of fulfilling that total promise? No. Okay, I would not go that far. But that's an opinion. I don't know that for a fact.
No,
but I also don't think anyone knows that for a fact. So
I mean, we're all learning at the same time, and we can only have like good hopes that we are reaching a point where we can just build a better future with the tools that we have at hand.
Sure. Yeah. But like, if my kids were caught an interest in writing software, would I advise them don't bother because AI is going to eat that job in the future? No, that's not where I personally land. I think and I have not seen anything that leads me to believe that developers won't continue to be extremely useful going forward.
Correct. So the way I see it is that the software engineering profession is not going anywhere. It's the tooling that is changing. So to an extent, I also mentioned this before we started chat. So in the very beginning, we were talking with the computer using binary code, and then it came the Javas and the Rubies and the structured languages, and now it's just a different way to interact. But the mindset of being cautious about all the architectural elements that need to be in the software foundation, those are still needed, because people without that capacity or that knowledge can ask LLM to do some stuff, or even the next iteration of AI, but without taking all the steps in consideration of what a real architect would do. Perhaps that's also what we were talking about with one of our other guests. So it's easy to have something that works, but not easy to have something that is reliable. And working versus reliable is a completely different story.
Fair.
Did you enjoy this video? Then hit the like button and share it with your network. Also be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.